I'm Janelle Monáe, and these are the finalists for the 2017 Hugo Awards for the Best Dramatic Presentation, Short Form. Black Mirror, San Junipero. Doctor Who, The Return of Dr. Mysterio. The Expanse, Leviathan Wakes. Game of Thrones, Battle of the Bastards. Game of Thrones, The Door. And the album Splendor and Misery by Clipping.
That was a significant moment in sci-fi history. The Hugo Awards, if you're not aware, are the most prestigious awards in sci-fi and fantasy. That category, dramatic presentation short form, obviously normally goes to TV episodes. But in 2017, the Hugos nominated something different. They nominated the album Splendor and Misery by Clipping.
Son of haters send him into orbit. Higher than these motherfuckers claiming it's their purpose. Turn and ask your partner why he started acting nervous. Keep talking, that's lip service.
To find the last album or piece of music that was recognized by the Hugo Awards, we have to go all the way back to 1971. The NASDAQ began, women got the right to vote in Switzerland, and Paul Cantor's Blows Against the Empire received a nomination in the same category. Now, the Hugos don't recognize music very often because, well, sci-fi stories aren't told in music very often, although there were a few examples of sci-fi music between 1971 and 2017. Still, because of its scarcity, pieces of sci-fi music usually follow the narrative structure of books, films, or television shows. This was clear with Splendor and Misery and a whole host of other sci-fi albums. They're good, but they still follow the same narrative structure as other media. What's really impressive is when a musician tells a sci-fi story that takes advantage of the unique storytelling avenues offered by the medium. And with that, we have to jump to 2007. Barack Obama launched his presidential run, the Great Recession began, and Janelle Monáe released her major studio debut, The Chase EP. The Chase is the first entry in Monáe's Metropolis Saga, which to date has spanned 3 projects, 6 years, and Monáe isn't even finished yet. To successfully keep a coherent narrative over the course of multiple musical projects is difficult in and of itself, but to do so the way Monáe has is pretty astounding. Before we even get to the music, we need to examine the cover art. As we'll find out later, android number 57821, otherwise known as Cindy Mayweather, is our main character, but the character also bears an obvious resemblance to Janelle Monáe. Janelle always represents Cindy, but that in and of itself isn't all that special. It's how Monáe uses that artistic decision to help tell the story, but we'll get to all that later. Now, the actual story presented in the Metropolis Saga is fairly long, not at all straightforward, and not entirely the point. I'll go through a bit of the first part of the story, but you really should listen for yourself to come to your own interpretation. I'm mainly going to focus on how Monáe tells the story. The first entry, The Chase, starts off by setting up Cindy as an android on the run, wanted for falling in love with a human. The first 2.5 songs set up a totalitarian society with a sect of oppressed androids fighting for freedom. The second half of the third song, titled Many Moons, is where the genius of the Metropolis Saga begins to become apparent. After the second verse, the song breaks into a series of short phrases that don't seem to take place in the same conceptual space. Some belong in our world.
Civil War, hood rat, crack whore, carefree, nightclub, closet drunk, bathtub, outcast, weirdo, stepchild, freak show, black girl, bad hair, broad nose, cold stare, tap shoes, Broadway, tuxedo, holiday, creative block, love song, stupid words, erase song, gunshots, orange house, dead man walking with a dirty man, spoiled milk, stale bread, welfare, bubonic plague, bread, light bulb, keep that kid down, corporate club, breast cancer, common cold, HIV, lost hope, overweight, self-esteem, misfit, broken home.
Some of them belong in the world of Metropolis.
Cybergirl, joy control, get away, no time, still you slow, microphone, one stage.
This is complicated further by the divergent nature of the song and music video. In the song and narrative of The Chase, Cindy is captured. In the video, which diverges from the musical narrative quite a bit, Cindy dies and this quote appears on screen. There are a couple of interpretations of this, but both deliver essentially the same message. Many moods can indicate that Cindy is less a person and more of an idea of eternal resistance, untethered from time and battling oppression. The other interpretation is that Cindy exists across different universes, an allegory for how different parts of our own world are, but how there are still similar battles going on in every area. Fights for equality, freedom, and expression. I personally believe that, in fitting with how the story of Metropolis is told, both of these interpretations are equally true. The song Many Moons takes place at two different times and seemingly in two different universes as well. This will happen over and over throughout the saga. Monáe's incorporation of this time and space displacement is unique in implementation. There's no lyric that tells the audience this is happening, and only a minor shift in musical style indicates the change. If you're not paying attention, you could miss it entirely. There isn't really a way to so easily bleed between settings in other media, and it works for this story by showing how easily Cindy, or the idea of Cindy, can be adopted in any place or time. A couple of tracks later, Sincerely Jane clearly depicts our time and world while reflecting the same ideas found in the Metropolis set vignettes. With Monáe singing in the first person and her embodiment of Cindy in all visual depictions of the character, this is a clear reference to Cindy bleeding into our world through Monáe. She may be captured in one place, but that doesn't mean the idea of her can be contained. The link between character, creator, and portrayer that Monáe draws with this song is something unique to music. Actors in film attempt to disappear into roles. Authors who insert themselves into stories as a separate character never link that pseudonym to their true identity. This is how Monáe is able to make a dystopian sci-fi story deeply personal and thematically relevant. It allows the different characters and worlds to flow together in a way no other medium could, allowing listeners to clearly draw parallels between Cindy's Metropolis and Monáe's planet Earth. People have always prescribed a much stronger link between musical artists and their work than they have with artists working in other spaces, and it was absolutely genius of Monáe to take advantage of that cultural tendency. This also helps crystallize the main theme of the Metropolis Saga, which, like most great sci-fi, is a critique of current society. In this case, the thesis of Monáe's story is that Cindy's fight does not just exist in a fictionalized dystopia, it exists in reality for millions of people. Oppression has always and will always occur, and has always and will always need fierce opponents. Sincerely Jane closes the chase and gives way to Monáe's debut album, The Archandroid, one of the greatest R&B albums of the 21st century. The album opens with an orchestral overture to give the project a cinematic feel before diving into a revolutionary anthem. The true opener, Dance or Die, is noteworthy for a few reasons. First, from the Saul Williams opener to the distinct lack of first-person pronouns, it clearly severs a tie from Cindy. She was captured the last we heard. But back to the Saul Williams opening, it injects a greater sense of revolution to the story as well, not by what he says, but by who he is. Monáe uses this feature and the feeling Saul Williams evokes to help boost her message. However, the song, which sets up Monáe's entire idea of revolution, doesn't buy into Williams' dark, edgy aesthetic. It's fast, it's happy, it's about dancing. The song calls for revolution of the spirit, for us to find ways and reasons to rejoice, even in the face of oppression, because without those things, freedom is truly already lost. This is the fierce opposition to oppression Monáe is calling for. This theme continues for several songs. Monáe never loses sight of the fact that this is a war. She simply refuses to allow her revolutionary characters to fall into despair or to lose their sense of joy. This isn't really an idea we've seen in modern sci-fi lately, and it's a beautiful, hopeful sentiment. These songs lead into the track Cold War, which is less focused on an overt fight for freedom and more of an internal struggle. You know, because it's a Cold War. Lines like this make it clear that oppression is not just a physical reality, but also one that has deep psychological impacts on the oppressed. This shift didn't come out of nowhere. These themes were hinted at in Dance or Die. As is the case with other overtly important songs in the story, Cold War bleeds into different narrative worlds, including our own. These two narrative devices have pretty clear implications. Those who suffer from oppression in our society, however overt or subtle, are affected much more than any onlooker could ever see. The impact is internal and devastating. These are the basic themes, structures, and storytelling devices used in Metropolis, and I'm not going to do a thorough breakdown of the plot because, as Monáe reveals in the song booklet for ArchAndroid, the story doesn't bear logical sense. But just because the story doesn't have any logical sense doesn't mean there isn't any rhyme or reason to what Monáe says on the chase, ArchAndroid, or the follow-up Electric Lady. Monáe uses her chosen medium to incorporate unique storytelling elements that make the Metropolis Saga less of a logical story and more of an abstract representation of ideas that take us through many different times and worlds, making the ideas Monáe sings about feel at once immediately necessary and eternally relevant. But because of the fractured abstract storytelling that often incorporates several temporal and physical settings at once, not only is the meaning of the story sort of up to interpretation, but the actual plot is as well. I encourage you to listen to the music, watch the videos, and come to your own conclusions about one of the most brilliant pieces of science fiction ever put to vinyl, because unlike most sci-fi music, it actually takes advantage of the medium. As always, thank you so much for watching this far into the video, especially a big thanks to the people donating over on Patreon. And if this is your first time watching my channel and you like what you saw, remember you can subscribe, you can donate on Patreon if you really like what you see, and I'll see you guys next time.